So, with infrastructure negotiations seemingly coming to a head and there being a final decision on what this final package would look like, I was debating with myself on how to present to you this new information. At first, I thought I would do it in the form of a rant to express my anger and frustration, as I'm sure many people across this country is feeling, based upon what looks like will be received by the American people from the corrupt politicians that they're hailing as some great accomplishment. What I'm referencing is this infrastructure bill. But the way I decided to do it is provide to you what is in the new bill, what got left out of it, the changes that were made, and ultimately who won and who lost during this entire negotiation. I hesitate to call it that now because nothing was negotiated. Things were just stripped out and the American people were left high and dry. So first of all, what was a $3.5 trillion infrastructure package, which was already whittled down from the previous $6 trillion that Bernie Sanders and more progressive lawmakers outlined, right? They whittled it down to 3.5 trillion. And now they've divided that number in half to be 1.7 trillion. Now, if you recently can recall, Joe Biden outlined that he wanted a 1.75 trillion to 1.9 trillion dollar package. He said that a couple days ago, maybe a week ago. Needless to say, it's in typical, very predictable Democratic politician fashion to take the lower end of that spectrum that he lined out. So the size of the bill is 1.7 trillion, and what's in it is the following: an expansion of healthcare coverage. So they're basically just subsidizing the ACA, $150 billion for affordable housing, earned income tax and child tax credit extended for 1 year. So originally they wanted to make the child tax credits permanent. They got a 1 year extension. Amazing. HBCU and Pell Grant funding. So we know that free community college was stripped out, and I'll get to that in just a second. Instead of giving you free community college, they decided we'll increase the maximum Pell Grant by $550. Crumbs, $100 billion for immigration, and I'll come back to that towards the end of the video. Clean energy tax credits. That's a huge compromise. Taxes on corporations and IRS enforcement. So they're going to fund the IRS to further crack down on the rich not paying their taxes, and they're also doing a 15% minimum tax for the corporations. There's also a surtax. I believe it's 5% over $10 million a year. So if you earn $10 million a year, there'll be a 5% surtax, and there's a 1% surcharge on stock buybacks and international tax changes that are in line with an agreement made by more than 100 countries earlier this month. And there's also free pre-K for 3 and 4 year olds, and that's it. And this free pre-K is funded for, I believe, 6 years. Yeah, it's funded for 6 years, and it's for families earning up to 250% of state median income. Now, that's what's in the $1.7 trillion bill. Now, let me tell you what's not in the bill. This is outstanding. Drug price reform. Gone. Trashed. Medicare for dental and vision. Gone. Trashed. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but I think I may have. But what's in it is Medicare that covers hearing. But Medicare for dental and vision, gone. Axed. A billionaire tax. So let me just say this. There will be no tax increases whatsoever. So the corporate tax won't get raised. There won't be a billionaire tax, the capital gains tax, the top marginal tax rate. None of that is happening. Paid family leave is completely gone. So they wanted 12 weeks of paid family leave. Wow, sounds great. That got whittled down to 4 weeks. Now it's gone. Clean Energy Performance Program. So the Clean Energy Performance Program, it would have provided financial incentives for electric utilities to transition away from fossil fuels. It was not included in the framework. It was seen as the best way to reduce U.S. emissions, but it was opposed by Joe Manchin, who, I need to add, takes a lot of money from the fossil fuel industry. Also, last but not least, I alluded to it before, free community college was left out of the framework. Now, with all that being said, I want to go over who won and who lost in these negotiations. Let's start with the winners, shall we? Okay, who won with these infrastructure negotiations are the following: Big Pharma, the fossil fuel industry, health insurance companies, creditors, billionaires slash the rich, corporations, and last but not least, the corrupted politicians. Now let's go over who lost. Everyone. Everybody. The vast majority of the American people have lost. The sick, the people that can't or couldn't previously afford their drug prices, they will continue to not be able to afford their drugs. And guess what will happen because they can't afford their medicine? And guess what awaits them on the other side of that? Death. Yeah, a casket, a funeral awaits them, because when they can't afford the things that sustain their life, they die. Guess what happens to Big Pharma when Medicare comes in to negotiate for lower drug prices? They lose a little bit of profit. Yeah, death doesn't await them. They just lose a little money. How much? Nothing compared to what they make. It's absolutely insane. It's immoral. It's unethical. It's an injustice to this entire system. So the sick people are losing out. Seniors, the seniors that can't afford dental and vision because Medicare won't cover it. All we got was hearing. They give you 1 out of the 3. That's how much they love you. So the seniors that can't afford dental and vision have lost out. College students have lost out because of the free community college. They will continue to plague students pursuing a higher education with insane amounts of debt that they can never pay back. Need I remind you that we have a student debt crisis in this country? 46 million students or former students hold $1.7 trillion in student loan debt. The labor force lost because of paid leave, 12 weeks to 4 weeks to nothing. And the future population as a whole has lost because we are spiraling towards disaster in terms of climate change. And they compromised on the compromise on the compromise. And all of the good climate change legislation was stripped. And they have these modest arrangements that they're touting out as grand accomplishments. This is absolutely despicable. And to put the cherry on top of the sundae, they are trying to include $100 billion, I believe it is, in immigration reform that would take the bill, I believe, from $1.75 trillion to $1.85 trillion. But there's a big question mark beside that because they got to run it by the Senate parliamentarian first to make sure that she agrees with it. The Democratic Party is a shell of what it once was compared to the party that was governed by Mr. FDR, the party that was governed by Mr. Lyndon B. Johnson. Both of those individuals should be rolling over. Matter of fact, they are rolling over in their graves right now, looking at what their former party is doing and looking at how they're treating the American population and what they're saying that they're receiving, and they're touting it as this grand accomplishment when in fact they're feeding you crumbs. At first, I like to think of it like this. So the $3.5 trillion bill in its entirety was inadequate. It was. But it had some very good legislation there, legislation that Democrats have been promising for some time. But in my opinion, it was like a half slice of cake. It wasn't a full slice. It wasn't anything to adequately get you full and sustain you for some time, but it was a half slice. It was going to be good and you'd enjoy it for the time being. What they did was they took that half slice, they threw it in the trash, and they reached in the dumpster and gave you whatever it was, a handful that they pulled out from the dumpster. And now they're expecting you to be happy about it and go vote for them in the midterms in the next election. Needless to say, neither of those things will happen. Okay? And now they face a very grim future ahead of them due to their negligence, due to their corruptness, due to the acts that they engage in that would enable them to do these types of things to the population that they're supposedly committed to serve. However, how as depressing, as frustrating, as angering as all of this may be, we knew this was coming. This is no surprise whatsoever. And I will relay a message that the president himself told us on the campaign trail. The message is the following: nothing will fundamentally change. And it seems like he's doing exactly what he promised.